Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Mr. Mlondi Mhluli. Mlondi, how you doing, man?
Hi, Nick. I'm good, and thank you very much for having me back in the show, man. How are you doing?
How am I doing? Let me tell you, being a fat man in this weather is not pleasant. Thankfully, it's cooled off a little bit over the past few days. We're also joined today, Mr. Gabriel Krause. Gabriel, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm delighted. I'm delighted by the presence of you gentlemen.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you,
Very good to hear. And we, of course, are very pleased to have you back on the show. Gabriel, you had some very brief thoughts to say before we start off about some new legislation coming down the pipeline about non-profit organizations. Do you just want to very quickly mention that before we move into the story?
Yes. So just a heads up that the General Amendments Bill in brackets affecting terrorism and non-profit organizations or something like that has been rushed through the process because of warnings about South Africa being grey listed, because we don't have the kinds of international best practice necessary in order to have financial transparency. In other words, the world's banking oversight body, FAFT, has looked at South Africa and they said, if you were a terrorist and you wanted to hide your money and launder it, South Africa would be a nice place to do it. You guys need to fix that. And the government said, how long do we have? We have got a year. Okay, we're going to start in 11 months. And that was a month ago. And so this is a problem. And one of the things, so they've got a bill which addresses some of the concerns, and that's good. But it also tries to say that every nonprofit in the country, every church, every synagogue, every mosque, whatever, has got to go and register with the government in a particular way and give their reasons for existence, and they're going to have to give annual reports on their activities and their boards. It's not a good idea. IRA fought against this 20 years ago, sent a letter. Public comment period has been extended until later. It's very good to see that there's a bit of a chance to fix that problem and hopefully do so in a way that still allows the grey listing threat to be avoided.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's definitely something to be avoided. We don't want civil society, people like us, to have the government boot put on our neck and all sorts of bureaucracy tangling everything up. Okay, let's go on to our first story, and this is some comments made by the head of business leadership South Africa, their CEO, Busisiwe Mavuso, who has just said that the ongoing Transnet strike, which I believe started last week, is throttling the country. She said, it is, quote, the most appalling act of economic sabotage we are seeing. It is throttling our economy to the point of no return. It's going to have a dire impact on our very fragile economy. She went on to say the economy had already been dealt a very serious blow by COVID-19, by the July unrest, by load shedding, and the KZN floods. It's not been a good year for KZN, and I just want to give a shout out to everyone in Durban. I hope your power is back after... I think half the city lost power last night after a substation blew up. Although I hear that a lot of it has been restored this morning. She went on to say, all of this is against the backdrop of low growth, high unemployment, and rising living costs. We are really doing an injustice to ordinary South Africans. So if we thought we were going to be able to arrest the 43% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition, I think that this just pushes us further away from that target. Unions at Transnet, which is, of course, a state-owned enterprise, have been striking, demanding wage increases of between 12% and 13.5%. So, Mlondi, let me just start with you. Do you agree with Mavuso's description of the strike as economic sabotage?
I most certainly do, Nick. I mean, our economy right now is very fragile. As she said, and I do not think that I don't think that a Transnet can be able to give a significant increase of between 11% to 13.5%. If I'm not mistaken, and as well, that this process has been having a significant impact on Transnet. So definitely, it does count as economic, sabotage, and it's pretty bad. So I hope that things will get resolved, as quick as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Amen.
Gabriel, this seems like a regular story we've talked about a lot of times at the Daily Friend Show. Union has very high wage demands, goes into a strike right at a crisis point when the country is really reeling from things. We've seen this in mining, we've seen this in public sector, all over the place. So firstly, just your take on the story in general. And secondly, what do you make of the comments by Busisiwe Mvuso? I must say, I've been, from what I can remember, and we've covered some of her comments on the show over the last couple of months, they've been pretty good. And I think they've been really adding to the conversation. It's nice to see business pushing back a little bit on some of the serious economic problems that we do have in South Africa, rather than the kind of usual timid, we'll talk behind closed doors, look at our shoes type stuff. And of course,
social compacting.
Right, exactly. And we've also seen a lot of stuff from Rob Hertzog recently, which is also, really stepped up criticism of the government in a very public way. So what do you make of all this, Gabriel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a mistake to... It's a mistake I frequently see, sort of in our circles, to although only made by a small portion of people, to think that unions are inherently bad. There's, this is just what unions do. Yes, in South Africa, that can seem like a reasonable proposition. Of course, it's not true internationally. And it's not true as a matter of course that unions don't have a positive role to play. But it is the case that South Africa's peculiar history has put labor unions in a position where, for the most part, their notion of bargaining is not oriented towards value add. And this does sound a little bit philosophical, but we have talked about it a lot. I think I got the line from you or one of your people. That one way to think about the splits in South Africa, we often talk about unity, but what about the real splits? There's a major split in this country between people who are all about value add. They want to go and make the world a better place. They get out of the morning, get out of bed and do something useful, whether it's a plumber or an accountant or an actuary or an entrepreneur, heaven forbid, maybe even a writer or a reporter or an analyst. They're trying to add to the sum of light. Then there's someone else who gets out of bed and their mission of the day is to grab something, is to take something away from someone else, value grab. And people who've got a zero-sum... Yeah,
perhaps best encapsulated in the Woolworths looter, that guy who looted at Woolworths during the July riots, who arrived in a BMW and had a private school education and government tenders.
Yes, yeah, that perfectly embodies the notion. And you have it at work, you have it, like I've definitely spoken to people who work in the civil service, but also in the private sector, who say, some people's notion of what a job is it's a place you show up in order to get money. Like, what is your job? Getting money. And sometimes when I'm feeling very frustrated and angry, I can see the appeal of giving up on the thought that you can actually make the world a better place and just thinking it's about trying to suck out as much as you can. The reason I'm sort of going to this abstract level is because I think it's difficult, without doing something like that, to explain how it is that over and over again over the last 3 decades, the trade unions in South Africa that dominate, COSATU, NAFTU, everything sort of falling under the old struggle umbrella, how it is that they so consistently break rather than make. I've spoken with people who are involved in top unions who said that they left because they realized it got to the stage where it really wasn't about the workers. It was about moving pieces around on a chessboard and floating their egos with a sense of how much they could make the business owners sweat and worry. But to bring it back to the concrete case that we have here, Transnet's value add proposition has in a way been radically decreasing with the incapacity of our rail and road networks, but particularly of our rail networks and our port systems. We had reports coming from the Mining Council last week that I think you guys discussed on the Daily Friend Show of like maybe 50 billion rands.
50 billion rands lost in exports, potential exports.
Because our infrastructure couldn't get the goods to market. You speak to anyone in the agriculture business, that it costs more to get a millie from the average farm in KZN or the Free State to Durban Harbour. Costs more to do that short trip than it does to get the mealie then from Durban Harbour to anywhere else on the planet. Because that you can use global free enterprise. And the first bit you have to rely on South African infrastructure. So the value add proposition is very low. In that context, to ask for an above inflation rise doesn't make sense. And yeah, Busisiwe Mavusa has it exactly right. It's sabotage. It's holding this country to ransom. It's unsustainable.
Indeed. And yeah, I hope that it's resolved really quickly because, anything that, particularly KZN, man, it's really been such a rough year for KZN, rough 24 months. I really hope things get better. And like I said, a shout out to everyone who is currently dealing with life in KZN. Okay, let's
starting with Mlondi, who's there right now.
Oh yeah, Mlondi, I thought you had escaped. I didn't realize you were back prisoner.
Not yet. I haven't escaped yet, but yeah, I'm still here in KZN.
Well, strength to your arm, sir. All right, let's move on to our next story. And I think we talked about this perhaps a few months ago, but there's been some interesting new developments. So Amazon wanted to build, Amazon, that of Jeff Bezos fame, wanted to build a headquarters in Cape Town at a site that I believe used to be a golf course. It's sort of like a disused golf course around two rivers. This headquarters that we're going to build there was expected to be completed by the end of November this year, and that the property, which is going to have not just Amazon's sort of corporate headquarters, but also I think some shops and some low-cost housing, was going to be handed over in December to be open for operation. However, construction was stopped for a time because a group of people calling themselves representatives of sort of First Nations people, Khoisan group, said that this area that Amazon was building its headquarters on was in fact sacred ground that was used for various rituals, and that people had used it in a time before they were dispossessed, and that it was very important that the site in fact not be developed. They were Amazon offered to build an indigenous garden, a cultural heritage center, and a heritage walk, and claimed that the development of the site, which currently is mostly disused as far as I understand, would actually sort of revitalize it as a site for indigenous cultural activities. That was rejected by this group, who, together with a group of local community people from the Observatory Civic Association, which is the suburb next to where this development is supposed to be taking place, managed to get a court order from Judge President Patricia Goliath to block the construction. So that court order is now being appealed. And there's been an interesting wrinkle, which is that another indigenous group has appeared saying that the first guys who opposed the development don't represent anybody and are lying in their court documents, and that in fact the real indigenous community supports the development and are fully behind Amazon developing the site as they've planned to. This is now being fought out in court, and it looks like today, according to some of the reporting, one of the opposed, a guy called Jenkins, to the construction, was unable to answer some serious questions in court as to whether he had lied or not. So we'll see where that goes. But an interesting little wrinkle there. So, Londi, very quickly, just you've spoken to someone involved in this development. What did they say? What's your take on this story?
Yes, Nick. Well, I was fortunate enough to be invited by someone who's actually involved in the construction of the of this project. I was still in Cape Town around about early this year. He invited me over, just for a chat, and in fact he did say that there are two groups. The first group of the Khoisan people is the group that says that there shouldn't be a development there, and then also now there's a second group that says that there should be a development, and yes, and I guess and I guess that what we see now, like the public is very interesting, because the guy that is from the other group who said that there shouldn't be a development has been found to be a liar, because he said that there's one of the leaders who said that they also agreed that there shouldn't be a development. But that guy, in fact, also came out now and said no, that's a lie. He has never met the guy before in his life, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. So definitely, as you can see, there are two groups here, and one appears to be the group that's lying, and the other, we can assume that they're speaking, that they're speaking the truth.
So, Gabriel, what's your take of this? I mean, so there's two parts to the story, right? There's firstly whether the development should have been blocked in the first place, and the second is this whole story of the competing groups, who both are claiming legitimacy as the true voice of the local Khoisan people. What do you make of it?
Yeah, man, it's like, whew, what a tale. I think it's amazing the power of the ancestors. If you claim the ancestors are on your side, who can be on the other side? Anyway, I'm being overwhelmed by noisy ancestors coming through the window, howling at me. But yeah, I mean, I think the long and short of it is that it's really good to see people stand up and be counted. I imagine that the leader of the second group, who's saying, no, look, this guy is influential. He's been put in an elevated position. He's the head of the spiritual relations group, and he is representing the wishes of the ancestors to say that the white international devil mustn't come here and disturb the tranquil soil. To stand up against that guy, I'm assuming is going to take a bit of guts. I'm assuming it's going to take a bit of effort. It's going to certainly put you in the firing line for a bit of criticism. But he did it. And what's the reward at the end of the day? The thing to look out for is an opportunity for thousands of jobs to be added. I do think that there's a broader question around whether Amazon is a sort of company welcome in South Africa. I know that some small businesses are concerned about a reduction in brick and mortar, mom and pop shops being able to sell their wares if you can easily order it online. People are also, fans of Craigslist and other online ordering companies, particularly in the tech sector. I know you, Nick, have often, I don't think you buy things excepting online.
That's basically true, yes.
And South Africa has innovated in terms of providing those services. Like the roads might have infinite potholes and the post office might not be able to deliver anything within a year and a half. I remember Terence Corrigan, our colleague, once doing a story about that. But the private sector has stepped in to fill the gap and help people get goods to market during the pandemic, before and after, etc. Anyway, so in a way, my feeling is that bring in Amazon. It's not coming into a vacuum. There's already a competitive space there. That'll force them to make a value add proposition of cheaper prices as a result of their economies of scale, their connections to global supply chains and so on. And if I can buy something for a little bit cheaper and more South Africans can have a bit of a job, what the hell? I don't know other people's ancestors as well as this guy claims to, but I reckon if I could have a chat, most ancestors would be pro poverty alleviation. I'm that's my big if true claim, but I'm going to make the claim that the true representatives of the ancestors are the guys that are trying to alleviate poverty and unemployment in that part of the world.
So I guess the only other thing maybe to talk about, and I don't know, either of you guys can pick up on this one if you want. The interesting kind of intersection here between people who are accused of being rent seekers, just seeking to extract from this multinational corporation some money, and what you might call NIMBYists. That is not in my backyard people. That's the Residents Association, which opposed this thing initially. It's a curious alliance, one that you wouldn't think at first glance think is makes sense, but I think it does make a lot of sense. And I must say, as on a personal level, I've become increasingly concerned that NIMBYism is a very serious problem for development in cities, not just in South Africa but around the world. I don't know, either of you guys want to give me an answer on that one?
Okay, I'll jump on it. I mean, so this is one of my frustrations about expropriation. It's clear to me that for a country to function well, you need powers of expropriation. You need the government to be able to come in and say, look, we need an airport, we need a military base, we need a border wall, we need an extension of a couple of lanes to the highway, we need to expand a dam that's going to be used to, supply water to a major urban development center, etc. You need government to be able to do that, and people are not going to want, any change to be made, and that's why in every country that works, in Western Europe, North America, East Asia, Latin America, in a few occasions where they work, you have expropriation policies to allow these things to kind of go through, even where a NIMBYist doesn't want it. And there you get compensation to make sure that you're made whole, where something has, if a stretch of your land had to be taken so that power lines or telephone lines back in the day, these days still power lines, get through. If the government wants to lay cable underneath and they break the stuff, they have to fix it again to allow it to go through. All of those things in America called eminent domain and elsewhere covered by expropriation. These are all simple and smart ways of going about business, and it's pretty settled international best practice in terms of how to do it. The weird thing about South Africa is that you've got a hyper-aggressive, hyper-hostile government. It's like a dog on rabies, right? And then the people who are worried about that, who are sort of eager to guard their own turf, everything in the name of guarding your own turf suddenly seems like it's legitimate because you're facing against a rabid dog. So it's like, if you see a dog in the street and you immediately take out your gun and shoot it in the head, like, I don't think that's a nice way to live. But that's how proposals to develop things sometimes come off. If South Africa is going to get to reach its potential, there are going to have to be shifts in the urban landscape. I can see it anecdotally in Johannesburg in Rosebank, which is kind of the second or third CBD. Parts of Dunkeld in the last 2 years, which was like a flat, mansiony urban area, suburban area rather, have been urbanized. 10-story high-rise buildings have been put in place, real estate, retail, commercial space development. Someone doesn't want to be next to that, but a lot of people are making money out of it, and that money is not the COSAT. It's not the strike money of just grabbing something for nothing. It's real value add. It's more businesses growing. It's more people getting more opportunities. So I do think that I think that the concern is especially piquant here, but it's because the threat is so often abused. The idea of coming into your backyard to do something for the good. Sometimes the good just sounds like Julius Malema saying, "Go there for revenge." That's the good, and then and that should trigger a very hostile response. That should trigger a logger, like a pushback mentality. Just you don't want to misapply that and throw the baby out with the bathwater. And anyway, I'm very enthusiastic about that development.
I agree with that completely, and I think another contributing factor is the high levels of corruption in cities' planning departments around the country. In that, people don't trust the state to approve or disapprove the right kind of projects. They say, in a more developed country, you might say there'll be people who oppose any development because, they just don't like change. But a lot of people will say, okay, well, look, have these people gotten all the planning approval? Have they submitted a proper plan? Are they actually doing something useful? Has the state looked and checked and made sure that they're not just going to cause a huge traffic and noise problem? But in South Africa, you don't have that guarantee because you don't know if the development planning officer has been paid off by the developer to develop some, monstrous concrete block in the middle of suburban housing. Anyway.
Yeah, dude, or anecdotally, a house close to where I lived in Joburg CBD that was clearly built illegally without any planning permission, and something went badly wrong and it burnt down, and I'm pretty sure someone died. Certainly, a few people were sent off to hospital, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I guess this is our sort of hypocrisy, outrage, government story for today. We do these, I think, fairly regularly, at least a couple a week. But this one came out over the weekend, and it was revealed that government ministers do not, in fact, have to pay utilities on their state housing, on their official residences. So every minister gets an official residence. That must mean there's quite a lot of them, because we have a lot of ministers and deputy ministers. And this was not, you may think, okay, well, it's been this way forever. Government fat cats, this is just how they roll. Well, no, apparently it was President Cyril Ramaphosa in June of this year who okayed this change to the ministerial handbook to add this perk.
Dude, can I just jump in here and quickly just say, that's wild. I saw the headline to the story, ministers don't have to pay for water and electricity or whatever. And I was like, who cares, dude? I'm sure it's been like that forever. But the fact that it was just introduced in the midst of like 2 million jobs, 1.5 million jobs being lost and unrecovered after the pandemic, in a period of technical recession, almost certainly, of the SARB having to hike interest rates, like in the middle of this, for Ramaphosa to do it, holy moly, that's wild.
Precisely my thoughts. And also, to make it even better, ministers' official residences are not subject to load shedding. The government has clarified, saying, look, everyone calm down. At their private houses, they still have to pay utilities and still get load shed. So what are you complaining about? Noddy, why would the president do this?
There can be two justifications for this, Nick. Firstly, it's because if we all can remember clearly, at the beginning of the year, the president did not make any changes for ministers, or I'm not sure whether he did, but if he did, it was a small change. It was just in their salaries. So maybe this could be a way of showing them, guys, look, your salaries might not have been increased. So here's a little bit of a benefit, just to make up for it. Or the second reason might be that this year we have a conference. Well, there's going to be an ANC conference in December. So he might be using this to say, guys, look, here's a little something, and please help me get votes in December. So I see this in both ways, and I could be wrong, but that's how I see it.
Gabriel, your final thoughts on this issue?
Oh man, you gotta love the fact that this party of the people. Hey, I had a realization the other day. I was going back over some old Ramaphosa speeches in order to try and get my head around what to expect at the leadership conference coming up that Mlondi was just referring to. So I was listening to Ramaphosa's speeches when he won in 2017, when he promised expropriation without compensation, his first solar address. And, one of the things that Ramaphosa really normalized was saying our people. Before that, the phrase our people was not nearly in such currency. And the first thing he did is he said, our people, we have to make sure we get the land for our people, and our people are suffering. We need to make sure that everything comes right. And MP Terry Lakota of COPE, which has not been going through good days at the minute, Terry Lakota asked him, dude, who's our people? Like, you want to take the land and give it to our people. Who's our people? Because you just swore to be the president of South Africa, all people. Malema answered on the president's behalf and said, our people are blacks in general and Africans in particular, which is a wonderful phrase. But, it made me realize part of the new thing is that now our people is just a euphemism for a race group, which is pretty terrible. But the other part of it is that our people is a possessive noun. It's the kind of thing you would say about your slaves. Hey? And when you're sitting in a situation with load shedding, with unemployment flying high, with cost of living increasing, with the economy decreasing, nothing is going right. But you now hand out, for one reason or another, in the build-up to the conference, to say, sorry, I didn't give you an above-inflation increase again. You hand out these freebies to your ministers while ordinary folks have to deal with sunflower oil doubling in price and the average bag of mealie meal going up 75% basically year on year. It really does start sounding to me like some of the leaders of the ANC, when they say our people, what they mean is, people that we own, people that must live a different kind of lifestyle, that must continue to suffer, because it is on that suffering that we can float rhetorically and have a justification to keep eating the money in the fashion that we do. I don't know, man. I kind of wish the minister. I wish the ministers were at least forced to invite some of our people over to their houses to put like some fish or some meat in the freezer during load shedding so that it can stay cold. Because when poor people lose their otherwise it just sounds very possessive to me. Anyway, it's a bit heavy, I suppose, but it's just so brazen and removed from reality.
I heard a story, a personal anecdote of I think it was some kind of therapist, and she recently had a client who was a senior government official, and apparently he entered in, spent the entire therapy session complaining about the Jews and the whites, and how they control everything, and then at the end said, "I'm not a medical aid," and threw out 300 rand at her and said, "There's my payment," and then left. So this is the attitude amongst so many in government, and I think of many things. When the book is written on the story of the ANC, I think the decline chapter will highlight these things very.
What do you mean the decline chapter? The decline book.
The decline book.
When the book is written on the ANC, it is going to be called Decline, slowly and then immediately.
Exactly. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for listening. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and we will see you soon on the Daily French Show. Cheers, everyone.